District. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Friedel.
Present.
Councilmember McMahon. Councilmember Charno. Councilmember Magazine. Councilmember Spellich.
Present.
Councilmember Grisbowski.
Present.
Thank you. First item is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of June 7th. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, Grady.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and for the public who are here tonight. We have before you the Cottonwoods Maintenance District tax levy, and our finance director will be giving you an overview of this and recommending approval. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Pock.
All right. Good evening, I guess, Madam Chair, board members. June 7th, the final budget was adopted for Cottonwoods Maintenance District. This tonight is to approve the tax levy to go to the assessor in the treasurer's office for collection of property taxes for the Cottonwoods Maintenance District. Total levy is $8,669. That's $149.46 over 58 parcels. That includes items for landscaping, the wall maintenance reserve that we build up each year. We just finished painting that this year. Also the postage and advertising costs. Those cumulative costs, this is the first year that we started charging the 10% administration fee, and that is 10% of those three items that I just mentioned. So if there are any questions?
I just had a question. So the Vice Mayor had asked previously about a couple different things about the district. One would be, what would be involved in the possible dissolution of that. Also, he had some good comments about cost recovery. And so I distributed a memo to the council last week on this very topic. And if the council, I realize it's probably not the appropriate time since we're really talking about the levy, but if the council is interested in this, when we do our budget process for the next year, we will present to the council some different options on both partial and full cost recovery. We are limited as to how much we can collect to not to exceed 18% of the total value of the parcel that we're currently maintaining. But if the council is interested, we can certainly do that through the next budget process if we're wanting to get more of a closer to full cost recovery.
Also, that was a lot of information, and thank you for getting that to us so that we can make a good decision on that. So I appreciate that.
Do we have any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. Trying to see where the motion is. Anybody want to? It's on page 3, I think. Yep. Oh, sorry. No, it's not. I'm losing it. I haven't seen it. Where's the motion?
Mayor, I think it's page 5.
Oh, page 5. Oh, there we go. Can I get a motion, please?
Move to adopt resolution CMD 2022-03. Did I
Thank
make
you.
it to the right page?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thanks so much. I will adjourn that meeting, and we'll start our regular meeting. Please stand for the pledge and remain standing. Okay, please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. All right. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Friedel.
Present.
Councilmember McMahon. Councilmember Charno. Councilmember Magazine. Councilmember Spellich. Present. Councilmember Grzybowski.
Present.
Thank you so much. As always, we start with our activities and reports. Town Manager, do you have anything?
Mayor and council, I do not have anything to report at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I know you have a couple things.
I do. Mayor, I'd like to request a point of privilege, if I may, take a couple minutes of the council's time, and if that's all right. Thank you. So at the last council meeting, there was some discussion at the end of the meeting dealing with the recent raise given to our town employees. And I think it left us a little bit unsettled because a lot of people, I got a lot of comments and emails from residents in town saying, how come there was no discussion on this? So what I'd like to do going forward is make sure that with the raise that they got was 4%, and in the last year and a half, it's about 10%, and we're adding about $200,000 in round figures to our current salary base here in the town. Over the years, that's going to add up to be a lot of money. So I'd like to know if we can make sure in the future that there's some kind of a line item or some kind of discussion whenever there's a raise proposed, because I think probably going forward now, salaries are one of our biggest expenses in this town, and I think the public might like to weigh in on it, and I know the council might like to have some discussion on it. So if that's something that we could consider doing in the future, I think it would be important for both the residents and the council.
Yes, and we're all for doing that. We did have some slides, but perhaps that got lost in that, so we'll try to be a little bit more open and make sure that seems to be a lot more clear to the council going forward. Thank you. We'll take that under advisement.
Thank you. So I do have a couple of other items. Last week I attended the Chamber's foundation ribbon cutting. So it's a new venture for the Chamber of Commerce in town, and it's exciting for them and for us. So if you get a chance, you can check that out on the Chamber's website. There were a lot of businesses and a lot of people in attendance. And also on June 14th, I attended the Global Ties Arizona. The town hosted a luncheon with mayors from Argentina, Botswana, Gambia, Italy, Kosovo, and South Africa. And these people were so impressed with this town, and above all, our fountain and our parks. They wanted to know a lot about our water reclamation and how we deal with our wastewater and that kind of thing. So it was a good exchange of ideas and thoughts, and we gave them a lot of information about our town, and they were very impressed with the fact that here we are in the middle of the desert, and we have a fountain that, one of the highest fountains in the world. So it was a good exchange, so it was a good thing to be able to attend. And then 2 Saturdays ago, I had the pleasure of attending Operation Screen Reduction, and you may be wondering what that's all about. The owners of Pearl Nutrition on Saturday, June 11th, in conjunction with a couple of businesses in town, held what we call Operation Screen Reduction. It's to get youth in our town off of screens, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, monitor, TVs, that type of thing. So in attendance were council candidates Brenda, Alan Skiller, Corin Hannah Toth, Sheriff Joe, Councilman David Spellich, and Orlando Brown did a lot of the videoing for the event. And the goal, again, was to raise money for the Boy Scouts in our local town to help send them off to camp and get them out of the house and off the screens. So I'm pleased to report that we raised over $3,700, and every single scout in this town will be attending camp. So it was very successful, and Scout Troop 343 raised all the funds necessary to be able to accomplish that goal. So it was really great to see the town come together and support the youth in this town. So it was well needed and well attended. Thank you.
Wrong button. I too attended, as Jerry just said, and I think we had 60 or 70 residents show up and write checks and hand cash to the Scoutmaster. So I think it was a great event, and they had a slideshow going on during the event and showed all the events that the kids that go to this camp participate in. There was horse riding and shooting, archery, a bunch of things. So I was really glad to go to it, and show them support, and I was even more excited that 60 or 70 residents showed up and donated, so thank you.
This week, I attended the one and only legislative update call that we've had in easily a month, if not 6 weeks. Also, I went to the GPEC Ambassador event, the Arizona's Craft Beer Industry. I was really bummed I couldn't go to the on-site meeting because rumor has it there was a taste test. Unfortunately, I had a meeting beforehand, so I couldn't make it work. According to the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild, we've got about 94 brewing companies in Arizona with about 120 brewing locations. In 2021, they estimated an economic impact just of this industry of $1 billion. So yeah, it was a very interesting meeting, and you know me, I'll talk beer. It was super fun.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Well, I really appreciate that you were able to go to that launch. Obviously, I was out of town. We have a lot of people out of town, abroad and such, so yeah, I got to go to my granddaughter's graduation, so that was very nice in New York. The only thing is tomorrow we have a MAG Regional Council passing of the gavel from Mesa Mayor Giles to Avondale Mayor Weiss, and I'm looking forward to that. Our next item is a proclamation, which is saying that July is Park and Recreations Month, so I think we might have a couple of commissioners here, and if you want to come up with Rachel, I will present. You can hold it, how's that? I will. I read it with writing that I can see. All right. There we go, ready? Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout the country, including the town of Fountain Hills, and promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being, and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities. And whereas Parks and Recreation is a leading provider of healthy meals, nutrition services, and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education, which are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Rec increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, tourism, attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Rec is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community and ensures the ecological beauty of our community and provides a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the town of Fountain Hills recognizes the benefits derived from Parks and Rec resources, so therefore I, Jenny Dickey, Mayor of Fountain Hills, do proclaim July to be recognized as Park and Recreation Month this 21st day of June 2022. Congratulations. Hey. Anybody have anything they want to say?
Thank you.
Mayor, I will say something on your way while you're walking back up. Congratulations to our Gold Star Parks Department. Thank you.
All right. Ooh, got a shock. Thank you so much. Our scheduled public appearances, we are going to have our presentation by Captain Kratzer from MCSO. Welcome, Captain.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Get this going here. That didn't take long to have technical difficulties. I just need the home screen. It's on the home screen here. There we go. Thank you. Okay, I know tonight is the last council meeting before summer break, so I promised Justin Weldy I'd keep this to an hour and a half. All right, so I usually try to do a stat presentation that covers the crime stats for the last couple of years around February, not long after the end of the year closes, so we have two to 3 years of stats that we could show what the year prior looked like. Well, I was unable to do that I had some unexpected time out of the office, so what I decided to do that I think would be a little bit more relevant was go back for 2 years, looking at kind of a modified fiscal year in a way. So the stat comparison that I'm going to do will look at 2 years, and as I go through, I'll explain what those 2 years timeframes will look like. So we'll look at June 2020 through May of 2021. It'll be a 12-month time period, and I'll just reference that as year 2021. And then we'll look at June 2021 through May 2022, same another 12-month period, and that'll just be referenced as year 2022. And what the stat comparison will review for those 2 years will be the top 20 calls for service. I think that's relevant because it shows what residents of town are calling into the sheriff's office for what those incidents are. They're not always crimes, you'll see as we go through those. Then I'll look at the top 20 on-view activities by deputies. So, and I'll have definitions of all this as we go. They'll be brief, but that's just when a deputy has downtime and they're conducting on-view activities, things that they observe. And then we'll look at the top 20 calls for service that resulted in an incident report. And that's a little different than the call for service, because a call for service with an incident report means that there was either a crime, and that's why a report's written, or something significant enough that a report should be authored. So those change a little bit than just the top 20 calls for service. And then we'll look at major crime indicators. That's probably what most people are the most interested in knowing, but we'll get there, and it won't take that long, I promise. Okay, so a call for service, that's a call generated by a member of the public or another agency or any external source to MCSO. So it's not anything a deputy is doing. It would be something that a deputy is called for, the MCSO is called for. So we'll get into our top 20 calls for service right away. So you could see welfare checks are the top 20, and that's the number one thing we get calls for. And that's usually someone can't get a hold of somebody and they would like a deputy to go check on somebody. Those numbers always remain really high. A false burglar alarm, you can see how high those are. Citizen motorist assist. And I don't know how well you guys can see those numbers. Hopefully they're clear enough for the members of the audience and those at home. I believe that this is going to be posted online on the website so people could go back and look at this. Follow-up, that's when somebody calls in just asking for additional follow-up on something. They may have another bit of information they want to add on a previous call. I highlighted some of the ones that there were noticeable changes on that, in my opinion, are a little bit more relevant. So I just want to let you know, if you have any questions during this or you want to stop me and ask any questions, sometimes what I think is relevant may be different than what you guys see, or something may jump out at you guys that you have a question on. But loud neighbors disturbing, we saw a drop in that, which I was a little surprised to see because we've had a lot more calls for service for some of our short-term rentals and we call them party houses. We've experienced an increase in those calls, but I think across the board, maybe other noise disturbances where someone just has neighbors playing some loud music, maybe that's dropped a little bit. Vehicle crash with no injuries. And again, remember, these are just the calls for service that the public makes. So sometimes when a deputy gets there, the call may change and it may not necessarily be what the call came in as. Vehicle crash with no injuries. We saw an increase there from 2021 of 116 to 163. In my next slide, I'm going to cover some of the significant things that we're seeing here. Going through suspicious persons, traffic hazards, civil actions, suspicious persons and vehicles, attempts to locate. A lot of times those are for drivers that are driving aggressively. Audible burglar alarms, civil matters and standbys. You could see thefts that dropped a little bit from the year prior. Assists to other agencies, if that's at Fort McDowell or Scottsdale, or another agency calls us for anything. Found property, animal noise problems, we saw an increase there. Criminal damage over 2 years remained the same for calls that we received, and then injured sick persons. So takeaways from that, what I noticed in that, and I use these to analyze kind of our personnel and maybe shifts and where we put personnel, or if we see a significant call for service peak, we try to put more personnel there. Suspicious activity calls and suspicious person and vehicle calls over the last 2 years, that just shows us that people are remaining diligent. We constantly ask people to be diligent in what you see. If you see something suspicious, please call it in, even if you think it may be nothing, but you got a hunch. We'll go check it out, and maybe it's nothing, and we'll clear it, or sometimes maybe it's someone looking to commit a burglary or some other crime. The loud neighbors disturbing calls have decreased by nearly 11%. The other thing to keep in mind on some of these, the percentage number that's associated to it looks really large, not necessarily here, but in some of the other stats, but kind of like with any numbers and data, when you have a small sample size, that percentage, a few calls or things can change it pretty drastically. Vehicle crash with no injury calls have increased by 40%, so we went from 116 to 163. Theft calls decreased by 19%.
Captain,
Yes.
I have a quick question on that increase of 40%.
Sure.
Do you know, is any of that due to being impaired?
Not many are due to impairment. We obviously have some vehicle crashes, even minor vehicle accidents, no injuries that result in DUIs. That number has remained pretty consistent over the last 2 years. Animal noise problems calls have increased by nearly 37%, and criminal damage calls have remained the exact same over the 2-year comparison at 57. And again, these are calls for service from the public. Sometimes a deputy may get there on a criminal damage, and it may be, someone wrote on the driveway with chalk, and even though it came in as a call that way, it's not really a crime, it's not a criminal damage. So that number could change from the end with the report. So next we'll look briefly at the on-view activity of a deputy, and that's self-initiated activity by a deputy and not a call for service from dispatch. On-view activity is generally conducted by a deputy when the deputy is not responding to a call for service, as calls for service take priority. So in our top 20 over the 2-year comparison, I'll highlight some of the ones that we saw significant changes or important changes. Patrol vacation watches, those are always high. We saw an increase in deputies doing those. I think a lot of people starting to get out of town again now that maybe COVID's starting to wane a little bit. School programs, we saw a pretty hefty increase in that. Again, a lot of things are COVID related here now that we're starting to get out of some of those restrictions. Welfare checks, we saw a pretty big increase on deputies doing those. Speeders, that one is just when a deputy, based on maybe an area he knows is problematic or she knows is problematic, or there's a call from a resident of, hey, we're getting speeders on our street, can you park in the area? So that's the amount of times deputies went out in those areas looking for speed enforcement. Community policing, we saw a large increase in that again. We were able to get out now and have more contact with individuals. We're starting to pick that up. But you can see some of the other, the traffic violations I didn't cover at the top, but that remained pretty consistent over that 2-year period that we looked at with just a 1.5% decrease. And so I kind of covered all this already. The traffic violations have remained mostly consistent. Patrol, vacation watches, school programs, community policing efforts have all increased substantially due to COVID restrictions relaxing. Welfare checks have increased by 135%. You could chalk that up to the same. And deputies patrolling for speeders have increased. And some of that is based on some of the emphasis over the last year with the corridors and all that. Calls for service with an incident report. So that's what we're looking at next. So these are the calls that the public made where the deputy took a report. So our policy requires a deputy to take a report if there's an allegation of a crime that's made and they can determine that it does appear a crime was made or did occur. But not only crimes, also for vehicle crashes. So vehicle crash with no injuries, we saw 100 in the year 2021, modified year 2021, and then an increase to 143. Thefts, we saw a decrease from 64 to 48. Criminal damages, we saw a slight decrease. Identity thefts, we saw a decrease. Trespassing, we saw a decrease. Frauds in con games, we saw a decrease, minimal, but a decrease. Disorderly conduct, we saw a pretty good sized decrease there from 40 to 21. Vehicle crash with injuries, we saw an increase from 25 to 35. Hit and run, no injuries, we saw an increase from 24 to 31. Now, hit and run with no injuries, that could be something as minor as, and not to downplay this, but a car parked at a grocery store parking lot and someone comes out and finds damage on their vehicle. The other driver didn't leave their information behind. That's a hit and run with no injuries. But a hit and run with no injuries could also occur on the roadway. Minor fender bender and a car takes off, so it's kind of all encompassing. Assaults, we saw an increase on that from 18 to 31. Shoplifting, we saw an increase from 18 to 29. And then assaults, domestic violence, we saw a slight decrease. So just some of the takeaways, we saw vehicle crash with no injuries reports. Those increased by 43%. Theft reports decreased by 25% in that 2-year comparison. Criminal damages saw a minor decrease. Identity thefts decreased by 24%. Trespassing decreased by 16. Fraud and con games decreased by 3 calls, so not a very significant amount. The disorderly conduct by 47.5 decrease. And then we did see a 40% increase with vehicle crashes with injuries. Hit and runs, we saw a 29% increase. And assaults, that increase from the 18 to 31 was a 72% increase. And then a shoplifting increased by 61%. Now, I can't answer for all of those. We do look when we see significant increases. We try to go back and see if there's any correlation we can make or things that we could do to try to bring that number down or put attention to those things, or understand why they went up. So like the shopliftings, Target is very good with their loss prevention at reporting shoplifting to us, and they get hit pretty good because they're a large department store with a lot of electronics. So they'll usually report when they get them. They might have 2 or 3 when they do report it at one time, and a lot of times they turn it over to us when they find. So some of that, we did see some increase with Target retail shop thefts with electronic devices over the last year. And then we'll move over to major crime indicators. And so these are crime stats that include arson, assaults, burglaries, homicides, motor vehicle thefts, robberies, sex violations, and thefts. So I think it's important in here to kind of let you know what, each of these entail, because some of them, even for me, it didn't make sense what some of them do until like a burglary. But arson, that one's pretty self-explanatory, includes any intentional or suspicious cause of fire for residential or businesses, or the attempt. So that's the key in this. This also includes attempts for any of these crimes. Assaults will include any simple assault, any aggravated assault. This will also include any domestic violence assaults, any stabbings, shootings, or attempts of these crimes. Burglaries include business and residential, as well as any attempts. Motor vehicle thefts include stolen vehicles and stolen vehicle attempts. Robberies include armed robberies, strong arm robberies, carjackings, and attempts of these crimes. And then theft is probably the biggest one because it encompasses so much. It includes thefts from vehicles, thefts from residential and businesses, shopliftings, and the attempts. So some of this numbers, the data, we all know how data can sometimes be used, and it's not necessarily used in an attempt to make it look bad or look good, but sometimes human error can play in there. Not even human error, but deputies, a lot of times the way this data is being collected is how a deputy clears a call for service. So if a deputy has a package, he gets a report of a package that was stolen off of the porch of a property, that in theory is a burglary. Someone entered a residential property to commit a crime. But some deputies may call that a theft from a theft and not a burglary. So you could see how maybe it could be reported different, a burglary rather than a theft. And we work hard to make sure that the deputies understand those things, but it happens. All right, so the major crime indicators for 2 years, the 2-year comparison, we see thefts in 2021, 199, in 2022, 175. And again, that includes all those things that theft incorporates, the theft from vehicles, the theft from residential and businesses, shopliftings, and attempts. So, and that also includes we saw a pretty significant rise in, and not just Fountain Hills, but the valley of, lost my train of thought there, of the deaths from the vehicles, I don't know why I'm my mind slipping on that one. The exhaust piece, I can't think of. Catalytic converter, I don't know why I couldn't think. Yeah, so we saw a significant increase across the state, not even just the state, across the United States in those. So that played some role in there, but the numbers were still down for 2022. Assaults were pretty even, 98, 99. Burglaries, that's where we saw an increase from 50 to 77. And then motor vehicle thefts, pretty close, a small decrease. Sexual violations, a little bit of a drop off there. Robberies, those numbers were the same, 2 and 2, very low numbers. And thankfully, in homicide and arsons, we saw 0. So that chart at the bottom just kind of shows that in a bar graph. It's not super crisp to see, but it just gives you kind of a visual But what I will say, and then this gives major crime indicators by month. So just this tells you major crime indicators tells you all those things that it includes, and it shows you a combined total month to month of how many of those we had. There's really not a pattern there. It kind of goes up, comes down. There's no significant pattern there. And then major crime indicator takeaways, thefts have decreased by 12%, assaults have remained consistent, burglaries have increased by 54%. And again, that number, that percent sounds large, and I mean, it is the change, but it's 50 to 77. And motor vehicle thefts have remained consistent from 31 to 29. So there were some things in not being able to address some of the, have my presentation for a couple months. We've had a couple of busy agendas here. There have been some topics of conversations that have come up that if I would have been doing the monthly presentations, maybe we would have addressed. And looking at the stats, you know, you don't always see the things that maybe people have reached out to MCSO on or the council. But one of the things that when I was looking through these, we did look at, you know, there was a large topic of conversations of the group homes or the rehabilitation homes. And we had a lot of emails from residents, and there was a lot of communication of just, you know, have you guys seen an increase in calls for service for those? And I just thought with doing this, and I know we've already kind of moved forward from that, but when we looked at that from law enforcement data and calls for service that we had, we didn't see any significant increase in numbers. In fact, we didn't really have any calls for service that were identifiable to the properties that were shown. Now, that's not to say that there were things that happened that weren't reported to law enforcement. That's just speaking on statistical data that we had for that. So I just wanted to bring that up if there was any questions on any of the things that I talked about today, or any crime statistics or things that maybe I didn't hit that you had interest in. Please ask.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Cap, as always. Do we track aggravated batteries of police officers?
I could get that data. We do track it. It's usually low enough in Fountain Hills that it doesn't hit on the radar of top 20 calls, or it would be included in that assault major crime indicator. But I don't have that number readily available for Fountain Hills, what it would look like for the last 2 years. I know we've had a couple.
Just interested.
Yeah.
Something that I would like to be addressed by you in the future after the break is if you could touch upon how many registered sex offenders live in Fountain Hills. If you could also touch on the policy of MCSO of checking for address checks of the residents of sex offenders. How many arrests we make of people that are in non-compliance who are registered sex offenders. So I'm kind of surprised at the number, just doing some peripheral research that of sex offenders that we have in town. So if you could maybe put a report together, I think it would be something that the residents might be interested in knowing. I think everybody should look and see where they live and see who's living by them. So if you could look into that and kind of give us an idea. I know in Chicago, we would do resident checks every 6 months to make sure people are in compliance. I don't know what it is here, and we also would make arrests.
Yeah, that's something we could do. I can work with the town manager on maybe how to get that to the council, or you know, time frame. I will tell you that at the district level, we don't have a lot of direct involvement. We have a unit that handles that, and I'm sure I could get that information from them. And I'm sure they have resources that can tell them by zip code and area where they are, and then also answering how many times they do the address checks or the registration update checks.
Great, appreciate it. What I wanted to address too is, I waited for this to talk to you personally. I received a couple of emails bashing me for running down law enforcement. So I don't know if the people, before they sat down at their computer, partaked in smoking some of the devil's lettuce, because anybody that knows me knows that I am a huge supporter of law enforcement. So where they got this from, they thought that I called into question because I asked for an audit of the MCSO contract and what services you're providing the town, what we're paying for, and making sure we're getting what we paid for. So let me clarify, which I don't think I need to clarify to you or to the men and women that are assigned to Fountain Hills. I'm not negative law enforcement. By me requesting that we check, because it's 50% of our budget. So I would think that when we're spending that much money on law enforcement, that the residents would want to know we're getting what we're paying, what we get paid for. So I hope you didn't take my comments and thought that I was running down MCSO. It's important to note that the men and women that serve, as well as you, don't have anything to do with the contract and the servicing of the contract. That's done by command staff down in Phoenix and the sheriff himself. So I want to make it perfectly clear that I respect, I love, and I support everybody in law enforcement, and especially the people that work here in Fountain Hills. So I didn't want my message to be taken out of context or spun. The problem that I have is I believe that we're paying a lot of money and spending a lot of our tax dollars, and I want to make sure we're getting what we paid for.
Councilmember Spellich, that's completely understandable. I think the men and women of law enforcement feel very supported by you and the council as a whole here, and have not, as far as I know, we've not had any feelings of the opposite of that. And regardless, you know, questioning the contract or, you know, the due diligence with fiscal responsibility, the deputies totally understand where that comes from. It's out of their reach and their control, and I don't think it slows them down one bit. So thank you for that.
Thanks for the report, Captain. It was very enlightening. Can you comment on the increase in burglaries? Is that more crime of opportunity, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we looked at that just to see, because there was a noticeable increase there, and that's essentially what it looks like. There was no trend or pattern of, you know, time of day or day of the week that it was occurring on. It was pretty sporadic, and most of them did appear to be crime of opportunities. We didn't have any, you know, major residential burglaries that resulted in high value. I don't want to say we didn't have any, but these weren't those. These were more of, you know, I can't speak, generally speaking, on all of them, because I'm going to put them all into one shape that they don't fit in. But yeah, they did appear to be more crime of opportunities and not necessarily any trend or pattern of this is the place to come in. And what I will say is, I don't know how you guys took this report, but if I was a resident of Fountain Hills, I'd be very pleased to live here. I think the crime stats are extremely low, especially when you compare Fountain Hills to the rest of the valley. And I mean, I'd be lucky. I'd feel lucky to live here and live in a place that had such low crime stats, especially violent crime stats. And, you know, I know the property crime stats are unsettling, but even those, and when you put them in, you know, relative, they're pretty low per population.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
And I'm sorry, Mayor, I did have one additional thing that I needed to advise you on that was separate from this, and it'll just take a couple of minutes. You may have some questions on it, but I think it's important to let the council know logistically with MCSO. I'm afraid to say this now with Councilmember Spellich. No, but this is something that the council should know. There's been some logistical changes within MCSO, and that's regarding the detectives that were at every patrol district. So each patrol district, we have 7 of them. We are called District 7, Fountain Hills, Rio Verde. We have 6 other ones, District 1 in Mesa, District 2 in Phoenix, District 3 in Sun City. All, you know, we have 7 of those. We each had our own unit of detectives at our district, and those detectives were responsible for the investigations of any crimes in that district that were beyond the scope of a patrol deputy, so something that may take a little bit more work to investigate. And they were also responsible for being called out after hours and investigate any serious crimes. So those detectives were housed here. We had 3. The town pays for 3 full-time detectives. The agency made a move. It was supposed to, I think it was, the goal was this fiscal year, so July. They made the move a little bit early. All of our detectives from the patrol districts have now been centralized and housed in the downtown Phoenix area. They're under now one unit called the General Crimes Division, and that division is now responsible for East and West Side, and all of the detectives are now housed there. So if we have a crime here that would be sent to a detective, typically before our patrol district detectives, it will now be investigated by them there in Phoenix, and then if there's a response that's needed, they would respond, the East Side crew would respond here for persons crimes, fraud crimes. Basically, they're broke down by persons and property crimes. So, you know, I'm not trying to sell you all the bad parts of this, because what the glaring effect of this is that we lose the 3 deputies that were housed here that we were able to sometimes utilize if there was a bigger call for service or an incident that occurred. They were here, they could respond. What we gain from this new centralized unit is more expertise. It's more in line with what the standard is in law enforcement in some of the major valley cities. Now, we differ quite a bit from the other city agencies because we service a bunch of different areas in Maricopa County, and we're not just the city of Mesa or the city of Phoenix. So, but one of the areas and one of the selling points of this is that those detectives are getting a lot more individual training for their area of expertise. So now they don't have to be good at investigating 3 or 4 different types of crime. They focus on the person's crime or the property crime. And one of the things we're seeing, and one of the reasons they went to that, was the identity theft cases that we're seeing a spike in and the specialized investigations that come with that. So they have a whole unit down there for identity thefts. A lot of times those were ones where the district detectives was a little bit out of their realm of understanding. Anyways, so I just wanted to let the council know that that move was made, that the agency did go to that, and so that'll be something that if there's further discussion we need, whether it's off the record or with the town manager, we can have.
Well, I would add this to the top of the list of something we want in the new IGA to have it back, because I do think as a small community, having those bodies here, if they're bodies that can be reallocated for other uses. I get the idea, thinking from a centralized standpoint, it might create the synergy and efficiencies, but I can see from our standpoint as a small community, I think it would be, we're losing 3 bodies. So I think that's something we should consider trying to get back.
I sure wish you would have said that before I went into my It doesn't change my opinion of MCSO. I know that decision wasn't made by you. I'm sure it was made by a big boss who has no idea what he's doing and has never spent any time being a detective. So now here's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about what our clearance rate is going to be. So for people and residents who don't know, when a detective is assigned a case, to see that case all the way through, either to an arrest or the case is closed, that's called a clearance rate. So what I would be concerned about is, because of that happening, the clearance rate plummeting. I don't know what the clearance rate is right now. I think you told me a while back what it was. So I would be very interested to find out, since this move has happened, when we had 3 detectives assigned to us, what was their clearance rate and how we can track it. I think, why weren't we consulted since we have a contract? You're not going to know the answer to that. I don't even know why I asked. Like I said, when you have these people in the ivory tower making decisions like that, that affect a small community like us, it doesn't make any sense to me. So,
And if I could,
Yeah.
Councilmember Spelch, that was probably one of my biggest concerns, was maybe the responsiveness and the service that maybe a resident here in Fountain Hills gets with the detective when they were here and they were housed here. It was easy for me to be over that case or get a call from a resident and look into it with my detective. And that can still happen. I just, I want to ensure, and we can definitely track case clearance and ensure that. I think they're going to need a little bit of time because it's been about a month and a half, 2 months, and there's probably not been a whole lot of clearances of cases, I would say, yet. So maybe we give it 6 months and we start doing a comparison. But what I was going to say is just also that responsiveness, ensuring that that still is there, that people can reach out to the detectives and have that same level of ownership of the investigation by a detective who, doesn't work here. There was something to be said about a detective working here, being assigned here with ownership of a case, and I'm just hoping we don't lose that in the transition. But to the town manager's point, I know that there's some negotiations going on, and that might be the time to broach that topic with executive command.
So are the 3 detectives that we lost, even though they went into would you call that the general assignment pool?
Yeah, general crimes unit. Yeah.
Okay. Those 3 detectives that we lost that are now downtown, are do those 3 detectives still going to handle things even though they're downtown, specific to Fountain Hills?
No, it'll be whatever detective is assigned on that unit who gets the case from here would be. So those 3 detectives would no longer have just ownership to Fountain Hills. They would be for the east side if they're assigned to the east side. So District 1, Lake Patrol, and Fountain Hills. So it would be whoever gets it, whoever's on call and whoever is the case agent. And it could be different quite a bit.
I hate to say it, but I think this is not going to be good.
I don't know that this is the place to have this kind of a conversation. This is obviously technical and, perhaps getting a detective who's an expert on the particular crime or whatever investigation that's happening here. So I think this is something, since we are in this transition, looking at the audit, looking at new negotiations, that is obviously something that we will look at going forward, but trying to get to the ins and outs right now of this and make judgments on it, maybe I'm not comfortable doing that right now. Obviously, it's a change, and it's something that I'm glad that we know about going forward, and we'll make sure that, as always, we are well-served by MCSO. Again, we haven't had this type of a study in the last maybe 2 years, but we were the safest zip code in the valley, and we were getting that for the least per capita and the least per square mile of any city or municipality town in Maricopa County. So I think that these are all items that we will look at going forward. I want to thank you so much because I know recently there were a missing person and some other things going on in town. It's so reassuring to see all of you there in the neighborhood and in town, and solving that and others that I'm aware of. So I really appreciate all your attention. And does anybody have any other questions or comments? Thank you so much, Captain.
Thank you.
Take care.
And Justin, I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next is our call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. First, we have one written comment from Jennifer Nelson that you received at your stations, and then we have 8 who were here who put in a request to speak card. First is Jacqueline Underwood.
Thank you. Actually, my name is Jacqueline Schlum Underwood. I've been a resident of this town for 45 years. It's breaking my heart to be here right now. I am so disappointed in this. My husband retired after 32 years of being a Phoenix police officer. He started spending more time at home. We said, we'll take on a project. We'll expand our backyard. January 28th, I wrote a letter to the town saying I got a survey done and I found I had a bunch of easements. January 28th, I wrote a letter to the town and said, how do I get rid of these easements? Time went by. March 9th, I called again. How do I get rid of these easements? And Farhad answered the phone and I said, I wrote you an email on January 28th. He confirmed, yes, I have it. Sorry, I haven't never called you back or replied. He sent me the instructions on how to remove the easements. Not an easy task. I had to write 8 letters to 8 different utilities, pay each of them a fine or a fee of usually $50 to $100. I compiled all this, got my survey done, paid to have my own survey, wrote a couple questions at Farhad, no answer. So I stopped in one day. I said, I'll just ask him. I walked upstairs. There was a woman standing at the desk, no greeting. I had my stack of papers. I said, I think I need to turn these in. Her response to me was, we don't take those here. So rude. I said, okay, can I speak to Farhad? I want to make sure I have everything. She said, you need to submit this online. Okay, I'll do that. Can I speak to Farhad? She went and got him, brought him back, and he said, he was very nice. He went through all my documents. He said I had everything in sight. I just need to submit online. Oh, and don't forget to pay the $750 fee to remove the easements that nobody wants on my property. So I went home, took care of that, paid the fee, submitted everything. What do you think I've heard from the town? Crickets. Nothing. This town deserves better service, not only from the town employees, but from you guys. These last meetings were embarrassing. They were so unprofessional. 45 years I've sat here, I've never had to do this. And I thought there was a time when we did have to do this. 2003, John Beidler. You want to know what happened to him? He was recalled. Shape up, we need a new change now.
Next is Liz Gildersleeve.
Good evening. I wanted to congratulate you on the legacy you'll be leaving for Fountain Hills. Thanks to your passage of the recently watered-down version of the Sober Home Ordinance that you voted on and passed in May. Perhaps you are already aware that local realtors, such as the one who's marketing a new construction build on Fountain Hills Boulevard, are already touting the possibility of a sober home to prospective buyers. So congrats. The word must be getting out now, just as we warned you it would, that Fountain Hills is officially a sober home destination, an easy mark, thanks to your weak ordinance. I'm sure the families that live near the Fountain Hills Boulevard new build location will be thrilled with the news. You could have been bold, you could have been brave, but you chose to side with the sober home and detox industry. You told us, in part, it was because you feared lawsuits. But apparently the recent $67 million lawsuit filed last week against the town from the Park Place developers in Maricopa County Superior Court is no big deal. Regardless of the outcome, and I hope it works out, but regardless of the outcome, where was that same boldness and tenacity that I watched you all display in the face of the Park Place developers during the sober home discussion? We would have cheered to see you defend your fellow residents and adopt the planning and zoning reasonable ordinance recommendation. Instead, moments after the sober home vote in May, residents watched Mr. Magazine, unfortunately he's not here, go down into the audience and shake the hands of the Fountain Hills Recovery owners. Did anyone seek out Ron and Marianne Sampson after your May vote? You might remember the homeowner who during her call to public tearfully and genuinely described what it was like living next to a sober home. Instead, Mayor Dickey, incredibly, you equated the Sampson situation to living next door to a barking dog. The lack of empathy was stunning. Again, well done. Our town can only hope the upcoming election will bring much-needed change to this room and a new council that will fix the problems you've thrust on our community, starting immediately with amending the Sober Home Ordinance. Thank you.
Next is Bart Shea.
Ironically, the developer she was referencing. So, 8 years ago, I came to town, there was a patch of dirt in the middle of it, and I got talked into developing the entire patch of dirt. 9 different development agreements were scratched over that piece of dirt. Not one of them ever came to fruition. 9 different development agreements were agreed to by the town. They could never get financing on, they could never build anything on, they couldn't do anything on. So after 2 years, we negotiated a development agreement. Got a little bit backed up on some stuff, couldn't get the thing done in time. Actually, we could have achieved a permit and not been timed out. Ironically, I was informed this morning, during a court case, that the town is elected to determine the development agreement is expired. And they're going to have no further review of the plans, which means it's a complete do-over on the thing, if it goes through. So the town they could have issued an at-risk grading permit like they did for the past 2 projects. They didn't. That would have kept it from getting timed out. The town granted approval in both phases to complete the grading prior to the building plans. This was a staff decision or a council decision. Either way, it was the cause of this delay on it. These are part of the agreements the town delayed through staff imposing unneeded conditions. In other words, staff decided the development agreement was not relevant and that we needed to follow the 2020 vision plan that was created in the development agreement and evidenced by the council asking which one was governing this parcel. The town is walking away from a lot of little things. So the town is literally walking away from $2.6 million worth of infrastructure that I was providing, paying for on town property. That'd be the completion of the avenue, which at this point is going to stay just like it looks, right on the street. Even if I build the project at this point without the development agreement, I'm under no condition to go improve that. I don't have to. That was a gift. The linear park from the Centennial Circle, which was the final connection to make the circle for downtown, that's no longer a requirement. That was only a requirement inside the development agreement. This council has decided that that no longer needs to be there. So even if I go build the product on there without the development agreement, you don't get the linear park. You weren't paying for it, I was. The town parking lot, the extra parking, that doesn't go either. All the arguments over how many spaces are going to be there and John's confusing concept of how it has to go, that's no longer there either. Again, it's $2.6 million. If the town wants to complete, they have to come up with it in budget. They're already $60 million in a hole for street repairs. But they're going to come up with 2.6 to finish downtown on it. The town's walking away. The town is walking away. Parking stalls. Here, uses of the avenue will only be accessible from the avenue. So if we don't build a product that was designed, implemented, and put in for permits on that and approved by the town council, from this point forward, the avenue, the fountain, can't be closed. In other words, no more fair, no more great fair, no more closed in Saguaro and the avenue. Thank you.
Next, we have Bridget Muehlner. Hopefully I said your name correctly.
I was interested in all the people that you had, that you met with, Botswana and all that. I just want to know where you had lunch.
Up at Adero Canyon.
I can't even imagine how you ended up picking all that. But anyway, the reason I'm here, and good evening, everybody, I understand the council took out liability insurance for sober living homes, but didn't include the responsibility of the house manager on the premises. I wanted to know why that decision was made. Why not have the responsibility of the house manager on the premises? I wanted to know about that. It's one of my questions. Don't want to put you on the spot. I also wanted to have clarification of the number of people allowed in sober living facilities in Fountain Hills. How many people are allowed in these facilities? I imagine that depends on how big that is. But is there a cap on these houses in this town? I mean, how many are we going to allow here?
If you don't mind, because you're asking a lot of questions, this item under state law is not agenda-sized for full discussion. So what I will do, we do have the department director in the back. I don't know if he brought business cards, but he can certainly answer all your questions that you've asked at the podium. So if you don't mind, he will get your information written down. John, do you need a tablet? I have that if you need it.
Okay, I do have a couple more points, if that's okay. Can I continue? I also wanted to know if parking of the residents, staff, and visitors has ever been addressed at these assisted or sober living houses. Next door to me at, I don't know if I can say the address, is that all right? Maybe not, okay. On Fountain Hills Boulevard, next door to me is at the new build. On the description, there was a assisted living put on the description, which they've since taken off. But they were going to have an assisted living there, I guess, at some point. But I guess apparently, because of the footage, 1,200-foot footage, they're no longer going to be able to do that. But I just wondered, because it's a boulevard and parking would have been an issue on the boulevard. And I just wondered what made them think they could go and do that. Time is up.
We'll get back to you. There's answers for probably all of that and more. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Next, we have Dominic Cerrone. Hopefully I said your name correctly.
I kind of feel a little like a fish out of water because I got nothing bad to say tonight. Good evening. My name is Dominic Cerrone, and I am here tonight to pass on my thanks. I'd like to recognize the staff at the Community Center for the overwhelming success of Joe Arpaio's 90th birthday celebration. From start to finish, Jennifer Lyons and her staff excelled in preparing and executing the event. With more than 250 people in attendance with many VIPs, the staff performed remarkably well. From the setup to the patriotic decorations, the electricity generated by the event will certainly circulate through Fountain Hills and the surrounding communities. Joe's birthday celebration will help Fountain Hills and the community center to be in the spotlight for other spectacular events. We have a gem of a facility and a staff that can help bring other meetings to our town. Fountain Hills has everything right here for what it takes to become a leader in the event planning marketplace. I've been coming here for 20 years, and I couldn't be more proud of the community center and the city council for helping to showcase this event. Thank you for all those involved in making this happen. Joe Arpaio's 90th birthday party is one that most people won't soon forget. Thank you.
Next, we have Lori Troller.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilman, Grady. I'm Lori Troller, resident. 5G is my topic. And hopefully you guys had a chance to read the 18-page article I left in your mailboxes. And I literally tried to email that for 10 hours. Didn't go through, sorry. But that's where I'm going to start with the assumption you guys now know exactly how dangerous and the death and disease that this type of radiation causes. And so the public knows. I'm happy to email anybody who would like that information, or you can contact Bob Burns in the back. He has a copy of the same letter, and he can publish that. I'm sure he's happy to. And I also promise it's written very simply. If you are scared at the technology and what it is, it's very simply written. You'll understand. So Mayor Dickey, we all understand safety is your utmost concern, so I'm hoping you can look at it in this light because it's a little different. And I'm asking for a special session to be scheduled during your vacation, to get this ordinance done and in place, because the timing is critical. The 5G rollout is well underway, and we need to get this in place before we have towers starting to pop up in our yards. They've already converted a few of the towers that they do own in the facility or in the town, in the churches and in the school. And I know everybody's seen the one at Palisades and Shea. We are about to be drenched in this 5G radiation. So looking across Arizona, Fountain Hills is one of only a handful of places that don't have a it's called a small cell ordinance in place. And without one, first of all, the aesthetics of this town is going to be dictated by the telecommunication companies. And the reason for that is it takes over 100,000 5G antennas to cover the area of Fountain Hills. So just imagine driving up Golden Eagle and seeing a straight line of fake cactuses in every third yard. It's not right. And second, the importance of not living in 5G radiation. So your proclamation you just made for the parks. So health and wellness, improves physical and mental health, cognitive performance, well-being, alleviating illness, depression, and incorporate or increase property values. 5G radiation is going to destroy all of it. So April's about to present the legality of what we can include in our ordinance. So please take her information and let's put this in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
Grady?
Just a point of correction, Lori. So I did send you, we did have a small cell wireless ordinance and a couple of resolutions that were passed in 2018. And it was based on the LIG's model ordinance that all the other cities pretty much followed. So we do have it in place, and I did send you an email just before this meeting with the copies of that so that you can take a look at it. But we do have regulations following state law, because in 2017, I believe it was, House Bill 2365 passed, governor signed it into law, and it pretty much requires cities and towns to not put up any obstacles to 5G coming into their communities. So, but we do have regulations that we were allowed to adopt, and so we do have some in place, but nothing that would prohibit it from coming into town.
Yeah, well, April will get on to that. We can do something about schools, and there are some towns that have done in the residential area, but she'll get into that. But thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have April McCormick.
Good evening, all. So I have dealt with this extensively for years everywhere I've lived, and that's been California and Hawaii. I'm now here. I'm originally from North Carolina. I've been a planning commissioner for a 500 square mile county, and I know way more about this than most people do. I know that the House 2365 was based on the FCC's federal order of 2018 and the fast track order, really limiting what you can do. However, multiple municipalities all over the country have taken the little bit of what they still can do and crafted that into a masterfully restrictive ordinance to protect residential property values and the aesthetics of their community. What the FCC order still allows you to do is to control the aesthetics of your town. And while we're talking about aesthetics with antennas, what that means is the location, the height, the setbacks, and one other thing I can't remember it off the top of my head. Yeah, the density, right, the spacing between them. So when these restrictive small cell ordinances are passed, basically a location is laid out per zoning district. So the first time I became aware of a unbelievably awesome 5G ordinance was Mill Valley, California. And as soon as they adopted that, I called the planning director, I called the attorneys, interviewed absolutely everyone, then I brought it to the city of Upland, California. We did a massive citizen education program, massive email campaign, petitions with hundreds, thousands of residents, and it was to the point where we just couldn't do nothing anymore. And so Mill Valley broke it down into most desired district, heavy industrial, light industrial, commercial, mixed use. Residential was off the list. And when House Bill 2365 was introduced, Yuma pitched a fit and became exempt. And Fountain Hills, having no streetlights whatsoever and being a dark sky community, could have done the same thing, I believe. I'd like you to actually go back and try to think about doing that. But while it's in place now, what you can do is you can do an urgency ordinance, which gives you 45 days to look over 3 different ordinances that I've supplied you today that do just what I explained. 1,500 feet apart, they can go in every other zoning classification besides residential, and you're doing that because aesthetically, it'll change this town forever. Let me tell you why you don't think you have a problem yet. When a carrier comes in to do a application, they're getting what's called a batch permit application. That goes to Public Works, not to you. And that's 25 antennas per single application. At that point, it's too late. You've lost all control, and they're never coming down. Even when you adopt an ordinance, they don't ask permission, they ask forgiveness. In Upland, we had them prohibited in the historic district. Well, one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, people out in the historic district were woken up out of a dead sleep because 5Gs were going on their utility pole outside of their home. The next day, myself and the council members amassed, called the number on the box, and some third party won't even tell you what carrier that was for. It's impossible to get them down once they're up, and you completely, by doing nothing, you are the lowest hanging fruit with a complete carte blanche. The ordinance is the most permissive thing I've ever seen, and it can be modified. Mill Valley's ordinance is 108 pages. I gave that to you today. Multiple municipalities all over the country are just copying it verbatim. It has stood up to challenge, and I would ask that you please put this on the agenda to discuss an urgency ordinance after you review the 3 different ordinances I gave you today. Thank you so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Dory Whittrigg.
Mayor and Council, my name is Dory Whittrigg, and this evening I just wanted to mention a few things about the Park Place and development, which is now a lawsuit development, I understand. But it's been an interesting period of time to see how this whole process has unraveled, and I won't pretend to know all the details. I don't. It depends on whether you're a not in my backyard kind of person or one who believes in progress and quality growth as to which side you might be on. And there are a lot of in between. I've been selling Fountain Hills since 1985, and always the completion of the downtown has been a very big bone of contention for our community. It's even more so for those who come here and see a lot of vacant land and weeds. It's easy to forget in 2022 how ugly this downtown was prior to the Phase 1 of Park Place. It's even easier to forget the immense amount of risk and effort and capital that it took for Bart Shea to get Phase 1 off the ground. But he did it and completely transformed our downtown and our community. Some like to quibble about building colors, but in the grand scheme of things, Bart brought hundreds of people to our downtown, which supported our businesses, which in turn supports the rest of our community. Our downtown is now a place of pride and enjoyment. It's easy to throw darts at most developers, and Bart Shea is no exception. He's a very bold personality who doesn't hold back his considerable opinion. You have to be bold to take the risks he has taken. But no one seems to give him credit for the many thousands of dollars he has donated to this community for items like the musical instrument park, the community garden, the community theater, and many, many other efforts that he just writes a check for. Currently, he's ready to donate $30,000 to the Fountain of Light sculpture to build the base because he cares. I've been embarrassed at times for our town council for the way you have talked down to someone who has made such a dramatic difference to our community. None of you sitting here or very few others ever, have made such a large contribution or impact in our community. I feel you've been no less than professional and have not taken into consideration the mountain of challenges there are to the development process in 2020 and 21 and 22. It has been horrendously difficult the last couple of years. And you've also made that process more difficult for him. And now you risk losing the linear park, the walkway, which would be the completion of the Avenue of the Fountains and the final stretch of the sidewalk and the landscaping, and the parking building that would give us 70 other public parking spaces. And all because you don't like the personality before you. And I realize that there are other technical issues, but from the outside looking in, the way you have behaved, you've really taken a personal vendetta against him. I encourage you to reconsider and work this out. And you will also be walking away from $500,000 in TPT taxes and $6 million in bed and sales taxes over the next 7 years, which would have done much to improve our roads. Please, let's work this out.
Thank you. Any more cards?
No, Mayor, that's it.
Thank you so much.
Just, Grady, could we ask John to please meet with Ms. Schlum at the back of the room? And
That was going to be the top of my agenda in the morning because we do have her contact information. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, we have our consent agenda. Unless you'd like to take something off, I could take a motion, please.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask B, the consideration for the approval of the 6-month extension, if it could be removed and voted on separately.
Oh, sure. Let's see. So what do I do? Just say we have all those items except that one?
Yeah, seek approval of, move for approval of the consent
Move for
agenda,
approval
except
of-
for item B. Yeah.
Okay, and then that'll be the first item. Can I have a motion, please?
Which one are we not approving right now? B as in boy?
Yes.
Okay, move to approve all of the consent minus B.
Thank you. Second. Thanks. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So this will become our first item, item B, 6-month extension for Saguaro and Shea. Grady?
I'm going to have Farhad go ahead and speak on this.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, hello. As you see before in the agenda, the applicant is requesting a 6-month extension. I have asked the applicant to attend to provide the reasoning for that extension request. But if you have any questions for me before I ask him to assist, please do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, was this subject to a traffic study of some sort? And where are we on that?
My understanding is it is subject to a traffic study, particularly the council at the time expressed concerns about ingress egress at that location. And however, the way it was left is that it would be subject to approval by the town engineer, who would typically do these types of evaluations for traffic studies. So it would be administrative at that level.
And if I may add, Mayor, that is to come with the site plan submittal, when and if that does come in.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I didn't mean to cause any confusion with this. It's just, would be hypocritical of me to approve an extension when I didn't approve the project to begin with. So that's why I wanted it separated out. I'm not for the extension. I'm not for the project. So that's why I didn't want it included in the agenda. I didn't mean staff to get thrown for a loop or anything, but I just want to be consistent in my voting.
Thank you. So I get a motion, please, on this. It's on page 119.
Move to approve a 6-month extension to the special use permit to allow residential uses at 9637 North Saguaro Boulevard for a maximum of 17 dwelling units, subject to the stipulations approved by council on December 7, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. So I think that means we don't have four, or is that a majority of those who are here? Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mayor, majority of the council, quorum of the council present, correct.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
quorum is present, all right. Thanks, David. Appreciate it, though. I understand. Our first item, and only, our regular agenda item is item 8A, repealing our resolution about a new fountain lighting policy. Rachel?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I do have a presentation, but in the interest of time, I know we have a lengthy secondary meeting. If you may recall, earlier this year, we presented a lighting policy regarding the requests for lights in the fountain. We had allocated an opportunity for the public to request that. However, since that time, there has been case law through our Supreme Court, and at the recommendation of our town attorney, he is recommending a amendment to that to remove the public opportunity to request colored lighting. So the motion before you tonight is to modify our policy to remove that option. Essentially, what it would do is that public requests for the fountain lighting would not be accepted, and that all lighting would be at the authorization of the town manager or the direction of council.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards for this?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. So everybody understand, Grady?
Yeah, just wanted to remind the council, I think about half the council was kind of leaning this way in the first place, so it shouldn't sound as a surprise. And we've already kind of been following that. We've had council members provide direction to staff. For instance, we lit up in the colors of Ukraine, their flag colors on the fountain, and we've done things like Domestic Violence Month and things like that. So I think it's going to be business as usual. The only thing is that we will be just removing the public component. And certainly the public could always request something through a council member then, and the council could then give us direction. But we're really saying that the policy as we know it before does not exist.
Thank you. Don't let anybody know that we like a mandate, but here's one that we're going along with. So can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve Resolution 2022-32 as presented.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Rachel, very much. Our next item is legislative items, and normally, we've been kind of rushing through these. Sharon, did you have anything you wanted to say about it? Well, we had a conference call with our consultant today. The budget, they got like 8 days left. We had, it's still up in the air, obviously. Senate Bill 1116, which removes residential rental tax, which has a $500,000 hit on town of Fountain Hills. We're hoping that there was some language in the Wayfair bill that's going to stop that from happening, but we just have to keep watching that. Short-term rental bill, not really what we wanted to see. Still a lot of back and forth on that, but if they come through with the budget, that bill's probably out the window. But we will do our own. We will work on our own ordinance. We're going to move ahead. We're going to look at fire as a hazard. We're going to look at parking, which has other ramifications. So look forward to that on a future agenda. And then we had the medical marijuana one, which threatens to kind of undo what we did when it passed. But again, that seems like maybe something that won't work because it goes against the Voter Protection Act. So we will see how all those things come out, but I want to make sure that we mention them all. Any other conversation? Thank you. So we will adjourn this meeting, if I can get a motion for that. Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And we're going to get going with our joint meeting with our wonderful school board. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll do some rearranging up here, and we'll get you up here, and we'll have some good talk. All right, and we're going to get going here. So we'll call to order, and we're going to start with, I will ask President Jenkins to introduce her members, please.
Thank you, Mayor Dickey. This evening from the school board, we have Dr. Wendy Barnard, Mrs. Jill Reed. I'm Nadia Jenkins. On this side, we have Mrs. Judy Rutkowski, and then Mr. Dana Sarr. I would also like to recognize down below, we have our current interim superintendent, Dr. Patrick Sweeney, and then our incoming superintendent, Dr. Kane Jagodinsky. And we also have our executive board secretary, Krista Andre, in the audience.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you here. And I apologize, but we had some major travel plans with a couple of our council members, but believe me, they're very interested, and we'll be happy to share with them everything that we talk about here. So, of course, we have Councilwoman Grzybowski, Sharon, we have Councilman Spelich, Mayor Dickey, and we have Vice Mayor Jerry Friedel, and and the other folks will catch them up on what we talk about. So our first item, yes, we're only here to discuss. We're not voting on anything. We just want to get together. You know, COVID, you know, I don't know when the time limit's going to run out where we can't keep blaming COVID for things, but we have, been planning for quite a while trying to get together. And I know now your school year is over, and this is a good time for us to talk. So I'm going to turn it over to Grady, and he will have our staff do presentations and such. Grady, our town manager.
Yes, so we're delighted if you look at the agenda under A, and then the first bullet, we have an item called Safe Routes to Schools. This was a collaborative effort between the Fountain Hills Unified School District and the town of Fountain Hills. We were able to apply successfully and receive some grant funding from the Maricopa Association of Governments. And I'm going to turn it over to Public Works Director Justin Weldy, who's going to just give you a little bit of an outline as to what the grant awards consist of and what we're going to be doing with that funding. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Weldy.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, Madam President, council members, board members, thank you for the opportunity to share this exciting information. The first section that we are going to be discussing is the Safe Routes to School grants. I would like to note that in the agenda that is published, it says opportunities. We took advantage of those opportunities some years back because these are every 2 to 4 years, depending on the type of grant, worked with the school district in getting letters of support and applied for and received 2. Please note that each time these opportunities come, we will again work with the school and the school board to apply for the grants that are applicable to this. The first one is the Safety Assessment Grant. This is a relatively large one. This is primarily funded through MAG. 94% of it comes from MAG. The matching funds for that come from the town of Fountain Hill. Relatively small dollar amount for what we're receiving. This one is a non-infrastructure assessment to determine how to make routes to school safer for the Fountain Hills Elementary and Middle School. The assessment will look at routes, traffic calming, signage, and other items related to those safe routes to enhance the safety for K through 8 children. Any questions on that one before we move forward? Fair enough. That one that I just mentioned, it actually becomes available in July of this year. We will collaborate with the school in regards to that process, and the selection for the engineering firm that will do that is actually done through MAG. We will keep the school updated on that process as we move forward.
We're also aware that there may be some school decisions that are going to be made in the future about maybe the school district and school locations. So we will, if there are some changes, we will definitely make sure that the study and analysis incorporates that, so that if there are any changes that might affect school locations, then we will certainly have that be part of the analysis.
Thank you for that additional information. Indeed, as we collaborate with the school, all of the information moving forward, we will share with the engineering firm as they work towards this assessment. The next one, which will become available in FY24, is a considerable amount of funding, and this one, again, is a 94% with the town matching the other, which is, again, a small amount of money at $882. This one right here is actually non-infrastructure to support activities that will educate and implement safe routes to school. This will support the first grant. This may include wages for a school safe route coordinator, safety gear, helmets, vests, etc., and incentive prizes for the students as they participate. It will also provide funding for school crossing guard training, which is very, very important and critical. We certainly want our marked crossings to be safe, and in order to accomplish that, we will collaborate with the school on the training for the individuals they have selected. Are there any questions about this grant? Fair enough.
This is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next one is actually a new one that we have collaborated with the school on. We've worked closely with the interim superintendent, Dr. Sweeney, and the transportation director, John Flynn. This is something that has been discussed between the school and the town for a number of years. This is actually permanently installed flashing school zone signs. On this particular project right here, with support from the town manager and the mayor and council, the town is going to fund this, which is also a strong recommendation in the ADOT manual that is published related to this. It's important to note that this process is moving relatively quickly. This was an in-house design by our staff, our town engineer, and our assistant engineer. We just this week, you may or may not, if you go into that area of Fountain Hills Boulevard, have seen some pink paint on the pavement. That is the survey. And before I get too much further, for those that may not be aware, this up here is the Fountain Hills Middle School. It's on North Fountain Hills Boulevard, just before you enter McDowell Mountain Road, with this being towards the north. As we worked to do this design, we recognized that southbound traffic on McDowell Mountain Road entering Fountain Hills Boulevard adjacent to this school, we're going to need to warn them in advance. So we have added an advanced sign on that corner that alerts them, and it'll be flashing to make them fully aware that they are entering a school zone in advanced time, so they will have time to slow down. The second flashing 15-mile-an-hour sign will be just north of the crosswalk. Here's the sign location that'll be flashing. Here is the marked yellow crosswalk. When we're going northbound, because we have an adequate sight distance, there will not be an advanced flashing light. There will just be the traditional reduced speed limit sign ahead, and then there will be the flashing 15-mile-an-hour. Once again, just before the crosswalk. These are the two types of structures that will be used on the project. Each of these structures are solar powered and communicate with each other via radio. The timing coordination will be through myself and the transportation director, John Flynn. So we will have the school calendar built into it. We will obviously monitor it with support and collaboration from the school. We think this one will be a well-deserved, long-awaited improvement in this area. Any questions related to this one?
Thank you. I have driven to that school countless times over many, many years, and these are very, very needed. I think people get very confused coming from Rio Verde, coming in very fast with the turn, not realizing that there's a school there. And then also people getting confused about the actual where it starts and where it stops based on the sign in the middle of the road right now. So This is going to do great things for the teachers who have duty at that crosswalk and also our students and the families so that we keep that road safe before and after school. So, and I'm so happy to see their solar panel. This is great. Thank you. This is very needed. Appreciate it.
Justin, I have a question. When will that be done?
Madam Mayor, council member, this will be done before the children return in August.
That's amazing. That's a nice addition. I agree with Dr. Barnard that,
Sorry, we're not that technologically advanced. So. That coming in from Rio Verde, I'm glad to see that there will be a sign that gives some warning, because folks do come in pretty quickly on that road, and anything to get them to slow down before they approach our students and crosswalk guards would be great. That's a nice addition, so thank you very much for everything you're putting into keeping our kids safe.
You're welcome. Madam Mayor, Madam President, any questions?
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much.
Make a comment.
Well,
My daughter's horse is in Rio Verde, so I drive there quite a bit. I was already there this morning. Well, don't speed.
Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Justin, I'm assuming that you're going to loop in with Captain Kratzer and possibly at times have that enforced by traffic control by radar?
Madam Mayor, council member, yes. While I can't speak for him, I will let you know that this area is patrolled nearly every school day during peak flow times. Whether or not you see a marked vehicle there, it is being patrolled.
Thank you.
I will comment on that, I have not gotten a ticket, but I have a lot of experience in the district. And so the Sheriff's Department does a really good job of patrolling our school zones, especially the one on Fountain Hills Boulevard. You know, the one that goes past McDowell Mountain is more of a residential street, so people tend to drive slower there. But Fountain Hills Boulevard, as we all know, can become a speedway. So the Sheriff's Department has done a really great job. Sometimes, you know, they're parked right in the middle of the road. Sometimes they're parked in a little bit more obscure location. Same with at the high school, you know, sometimes they're visible and sometimes they're not. And we've seen a lot of speeders get pulled over coming right out of that school zone. So I appreciate everything the Sheriff's Department does for that.
Thank you, Board Member. That kind of goes in with the statistic that we saw between speeding from last year and speeding from this year, that we've really picked that up. So this next item, I just wanted to mention that I'd had some folks reach out to me about this, about the rules of the road, you know, which side do you ride your bike on, which side do you walk on and such. And, you know, it's a kind of a big deal, and it made me remember when the kids were at McDowell Mountain School, and we'd get the, you know, when they'd go and they'd get the handbook right away, and it was all about that. So I thought, well, maybe there's a way for us to kind of partner on this. And so is Bo going to speak to this, or Grady?
Bo is. In fact, Community Relations Director will go ahead and kind of explain what his plans are related to this.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Madam President and Council and School Board. My name is Bo Larson. I'm the Director of Community Relations. We have had some discussions about this, and I've been doing some research on what other communities have done. And I, too, remember, you know, those brochures of what side to ride on and how to properly cross the street and who to respect as you go along. And so there's a lot of information out there from MAG, the City of Scottsdale, this U.S. Department of Transportation, as well as the Arizona Department of Transportation for us to glean upon. And so what I'd like to do is work with the school board, or you're assigned, to figure out what do we need and what order do we need them, because there's a variety of, you know, timings I'm sure you're going to have. But one of the things that the mayor and town manager have kind of donated me for is to develop the collateral, do social media, provide the internet resources that are needed that we can share on multiple platforms, as well as our Channel 11, our Cox Channel 11, just to help get the momentum of communications out there. And so I think there's a great opportunity to really raise the level of awareness of the importance of not only the children understanding how to do things, but the adults remembering how to do things. So that way we can, if there is a stat that we want to lower, I hope we will lower it.
Questions or comments about that?
Are there any plans to do anything at the high school and the flashing lights or any of, oh, I should have asked that before.
I will not speak on his behalf, but
Okay, yeah, and even some outreach, I do think that that is another area that people don't understand. It's just educating people when it's, kids push the button to make it flashed across the street, and people will still drive through it, and that's more of a older, like, educating residents that when it's flashing, you must, what is the rule? You have to stop, you have, all of that.
To answer your question, the high school is not zoned a school zone. That's a pedestrian crosswalk. So that's actually town mandated. It's not a school zone. So because it's a high school, I believe, Dr. Sweeney, we cannot put a school zone there. Is that correct, Grady?
That's my understanding with the regulations governing schools. That's on a major arterial, so that would not be the same as an interior. And it's also the age of the kids that are going there. So you are correct.
But as Dr. Barnard said, some education that even though that's a pedestrian crosswalk, not necessarily associated with the high school, if the button's pushed and those lights are flashing, it would be nice if people stopped because that's the law. But the other thing that I notice is a lot of people don't understand how to maneuver through a school zone. Like, do they stop before the light, slow down before? Do they go all the way through and continue past the other signs? So some education on how to drive through a school zone. So.
Thank you.
I will just comment and say, as an avid walker in our community who often sees people walking on the incorrect side of the road and who has quite adamantly taught my children how to properly walk on the road, I would appreciate anything for both our students as well as our more tenured citizens to know how to be safe on the roadways.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor and Madam President, those are things that I want to make sure that working with you that we're at the proper level for the communications, because one size definitely doesn't fit all for the population we're talking about. So I look forward to working with you. Good.
Thanks very much. Next, it just says other concerns or issues about this, like safety, school safety. So is there anything, I know your superintendent got your PhD on school safety and such, and so wondered if there's anything you'd want to communicate with us or anything we can help with when it comes to that, given recent histories or anything that you'd like to convey. Yes, ma'am.
I personally don't have an item other than to say that as Dr. Jagodinsky comes in, the school board will be having a retreat so that we can collectively synchronize as a new body with our superintendent. And one of the priorities will definitely be school safety. It's an annual priority. We are due for another review with, or I say due, it's not something that's mandated. We as a district know that we haven't been reviewed by Homeland Security to reassess the safety and security of our buildings for a couple years, in part because of COVID. So that's something that we definitely want to revisit and prioritize, and then certainly based on that assessment, we can then itemize what actions we need to take and what budgetary dollars we can put towards that.
Perfect. Dana.
Yeah, and you mentioned the budget issue, obviously, and that's an important aspect of what we're going to talk about later on when it comes to our facilities. Right now, with 3 facilities, we have to make sure that all 3 of those are safe. And we've done a lot of investment to keep them a lot safer than they were back in my day early on, and Jenny's as well. However, we may be down to 2, which means we'll save some of that funding that we've been applying to McDowell Mountain potentially, and we can apply that somewhere else. But safety is by far and away our most important aspect of what we do. Obviously, student success might be number 1, but that doesn't work if you don't have a safe school environment. So everything that's been talked about so far in terms of safety is so important.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Dr. J, do you have anything off the top of your head that you'd like to
I was
bring
just
up to the
going to
council?
put him on the spot. I was going to do the same thing.
I think school safety is a huge issue, and I spent a lot of time researching
I'd just like to thank the town for your ongoing support of the SRO. You know, we have a long history of having great SROs in that position, excellent relationship with the sheriff's office, and SRO after SRO after SRO is they have good relationships with the kids. They provide, you know, that presence and immediate response and reaction when needed. And I know that's a commitment the town has taken on through the years, and I really, really appreciate it and hope that that continues.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. We really appreciate that. Anything else on this safety items or anything traffic? Thank you. Next, I think Grady's going to talk to us about our transportation IGA or proposal.
Yes. So something related to this was brought up probably about 3 or 4 years ago between the town and the school district at one of these joint meetings. And since that time, the administration under Dr. Sweeney and then Rob, when he was superintendent, began to allow us to utilize like the vans that are there. But what we're thinking is it's probably time to formalize something into some sort of intergovernmental agreement. One of the things we'd like to do, for instance, the vans are great and they've been very much appreciated by the staff. But one of the things that we're looking at is perhaps in the summertime when there's off-peak use by the school district, we might be able to take advantage of the school buses, and perhaps the bus drivers in the town can maybe pay some, you know, hourly rate for the bus drivers and maybe for the use of the buses for, say, a summer recreation program or our senior program, something like that. So that's what we're really basically talking about. But thanks to Dr. Sweeney, initially, when we had this on a previous agenda, he allowed us to follow up and start using the vehicle. So it's probably time now. We haven't taken advantage of it except for maybe the last couple years, and it's been very sporadic, but it's probably time for us to actually formalize it into an IGA and bring it back to both of the governing body of the school district and also our council.
Any questions or comments on that? Yes, Sharon.
It's been a number of years, but I remember there was some sort of communication breakdown at some point. I know it's been a couple of employees ago, but somebody actually was stranded. I think they were stranded here, and the bus or the van or whatever name never came and picked them up. I don't remember who it is. I just vaguely remember this because this seems so long ago. So I feel like part of my concern is when we do this, we need to ensure that our local folks, I mean, usually these things happen on Saturdays for us or after regular school hours. So our local folks need to have the phone number of the driver so that they can contact them. Was it an emergency? Did they just forget? I don't want a group of 30 kids stranded, depressed, because community services planned this really super fun trip and now they don't have a ride to it.
Very good point, and something, you know, when you do put these together, sometimes you don't include all those types of contingencies in the actual intergovernmental agreement, but from an operational standpoint, you certainly want to make sure that we have that kind of information available, and it's a very good thing to bring up, so I appreciate that, council member.
Yes, not stranding kids is a good idea. We have other IGAs to talk about, Grady. I think these are our existing ones relating to communications and other things. So I don't know if you want to take them all in a big lump or.
I just thought I'd just bring these up. So we just bring these up just more or less just to show the breadth and extension of our relationships and how they extend. So clearly through Cox Communications, the town of Fountain Hills makes available the education channel for use by the school district. Also, we have the intergovernmental agreement that covers any type of construction activity. We do not charge building permit fees or things, you know, inspection fees, things related to that. So in exchange for joint use of the school district facilities, then we're not extending costs to you for basically those services. And then finally, we have an intergovernmental agreement related to shared use of district and town facilities. As an example, every year we have the graduation held at the amphitheater at Fountain Park. The town has also utilized, not as much anymore, but we have in the past, like the gyms at the high school. And also the school district has also utilized on occasion the community center. So this has just been, as a small town and a small school district, we really benefit from having a very good working relationship. And it doesn't really make sense. I mean, it is a true partnership in the spirit of what a partnership is. So hopefully by this next time we have a meeting like this, we'll have the intergovernmental agreement will also be something that will be already approved and on that list. I'd be happy to answer if you have any questions about those items, but they're just there just to remind us the relationship that we have and our partnerships that we already utilize.
Thank you, Grady. And I just want to say that the IGA for the shared use has become really popular with the school district, with the community center. In the previous years, many moons ago, when I was on the PTO, we always held the gala, which is our large fundraiser for the year, at different resorts, sometimes closed, sometimes not closed. But the PTO has partnered now with using the community centers, so it keeps our folks here local. They're using local vendors. Our sports teams are now using the community center a lot for team dinners, as opposed to having it at someone's home, which again kind of keeps it local, keeps our kids in a space that isn't at someone's home. It's a little more safe. Not that our parents aren't safe, but it's just a little more formal. So we really appreciate that the town offers us that ability to have the community center to use for those banquets. So.
Yeah, I second what Jill said. I think it's a great reciprocal relationship. And I don't know, I remember at one point, not everybody knows that we have this agreement that we share facilities, we encourage the use of facilities from the town and the school. So, I mean, I would say, making this more known to different groups, from, our athletics to everything else, and then also the town. Certainly, I remember my children going to some of those really awesome summer camps at the middle school gym. And so I think that we should revisit this. I think it's the 15th anniversary of this, looking at it, 2007. It's actually a photocopied with 3-ring binder. I am like, yeah. So I think revisiting it, even if the language stays the same with the new signatures and all of that, keeps it fresh and a living document that people know about and use.
Good point. And I'll work with staff on maybe doing some updates. There's probably some maybe things related to risk management and insurance and things like that that probably have changed since this probably originally went in. So thank you. Thanks for the comment.
Okay, I'm going to be a big old pin in your balloon. We just had a lot of heartache and got a lot of emails and really got beat up about the community center and all of the new rules and the new pricing that we just put into place. I'm not saying we should charge. I'm just tossing that out there that we're going to get hit from a lot of people that it's not fair. You're charging, insert whatever your favorite music or acting or whatever. So expect to hear that. So we should be prepared. I don't know where we're going to stand on this.
Well, you want to say something? Dana and I have been here so long, going back and forth with this, so yes, sir.
And that's true. I'm just older than you. So we had a wonderful arrangement between the school district and the town for many years. We transferred land easily. We transferred the operational of the parks and other things back in the day to where I think if you remember, we won an award and from the state for having this relationship between the two governments. So the fact that it's been a while since we reviewed these, it's probably a good idea, but I think as we go forward, there's probably going to be some good reasons to have more of these. I hope, anyway.
And to your point, Sharon, and I remember as a school board member traipsing down to town council meetings, and this was about the SRO, but it's the same constituency. So I understand what you're saying about clubs and entertainment and such, but the school district is, is paid for by the same exact taxpayers as we are. It is a very natural partnership, and I think when we talk about the gyms or doing some of those things, I think basketball or whatever, things that we lack are absolutely the perfect solution for all of the kids that live in this town, because they go to the school and their parents pay the same taxes, such as they are for both of our entities. So it's a really natural partnership, and I really appreciate that you're going to revisit it, because I agree that there's probably some stuff that needs to be updated. But Sharon, I do appreciate what you're saying, because we did just go through that whole exercise, but I definitely see this different, and we have IGAs with the sanitary district as well, so we keep that big picture in mind whenever we can. Yes, sir. Vice Mayor.
Sharon, maybe the FHCCA will contact the school district and maybe work out some arrangements directly.
Let's move on. No. Thank you, Jerry. So Dana, do you want to take the next one, or do you have other staff that's going to introduce?
I'm delegated because I've been the one probably talking most about this. As I said earlier, we're looking at enrollment projections that take us below 1,000 students. Currently, we could put all of our students that are enrolled this fall into one facility at the high school and have room left over. So we know we've got excess resources that we are dealing with and we're paying for. McDowell Mountain is going to be utilized again this coming year, but we're close to making a decision on what to do with that going forward. Four Peaks has been closed for our purposes for quite some time. We're not in the landlord business, and it is the oldest facility in the district, and whether it's feasible to re-image it for some other use or it should be torn down is discussions that we're going to have. The same thing can be said about McDowell Mountain. I was living here and down the road from there when it was being built, and I've been in construction most of my life, and it was not designed to be a century-old facility. It's pretty much outlived its usefulness, not just from a physical standpoint, but quite frankly, from an academic standpoint. We don't know what 50 years from now will require from us in terms of facilities, maybe nothing at all, quite frankly, but that's so far down the line that to project our needs for maybe a change in the demographics in Fountain Hills, maybe not. But we don't want to necessarily give up the ability to do something with those two properties 50 years from now. We just don't know what our needs will be. So one of the thoughts that we've had among many is that we work out an agreement with the town to reuse the land itself. We know, when I was on a committee here, we realized that we were short park space based on our population and so forth. And we're landlocked, so we don't have a lot of extra space to develop parklands. But with the lack of need for those two parcels for educational purposes, there's quite frankly a possibility that they could be made into park. The first thing that comes up in my mind, because I have neighbors that have dogs, is a dog park. But that's just one of 100 ideas that could be utilized in those areas. McDowell Mountain has a wash that runs through it. On the south side of that wash, we worked with the town many years ago to develop a passive park at that location with the bridge over the wash. The same thing was being developed at the high school campus on one side of the wash that is now desert into a passive park, which would have helped our park numbers a little bit. So I think no decision is ready to be made at this point yet, and we've only briefly talked about it as a board. But I do think that going forward, that discussion needs to take place. And that between our administrators and our two entities, we need to come up with a solution that meets the needs of the entire community. As we've said already, even though we have a few more residents than the town does because of some annexations that took place years and years ago, and in the last 10 years, actually. For the most part, we share the same people. So no matter who owns them, you or us, the same resources available to the same people. So I look forward to these discussions going forward on what we can do with those two parcels that we may or may not actually use.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions, or comments about this? No? Well, just, obviously, I think in terms of what the legal uses are and what can possibly happen, and also the educational plans that you have to maybe, we always want to have more families. We like to have a intergenerational group here, again, living in the past, but when we all moved here, it was a lot of young kids, a lot of young families, so seeing how that develops, seeing how the, what you think, you mentioned the demographics, and even way back then, you were always, kind of on top of that, kind of looking at what could be expected as far as income levels and such, and so I look forward to that conversation, and with the facts, with what can, what can we accomplish together, and I think it's always about that, and really appreciate it very much. Any other questions or comments about this issue, or any issue, actually? Yes, ma'am.
That we as a board are still going to be talking about this.
Oh, yes, I can imagine you will be. Any other items for the good of the order? Staff, you guys have anything? No? Everybody's good? All right, well, I guess I could do I get a motion to adjourn here? I don't even know. I suppose, yes? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Everybody's in favor, I'm thinking? All in favor? Aye. Thank you so much. We appreciate it so much.